I should not say this out loud, and yet here I am, sitting with the weight of it in my chest, because some truths refuse to stay quiet. I have carried this one carefully, almost protectively, the way you carry something fragile through a crowded room. I know you are listening. I know your eyes are on this moment. And I know that somewhere, maybe closer than I admit to myself, you are holding your breath because you recognize yourself in what I am about to confess. If this moment feels gentle to you, if it feels like a place you want to stay for a while, press like and stay with me. If you feel a quiet connection here, subscribe so we can keep meeting in moments like this. Tell me where you are watching from, just the place, nothing more. What time is it there right now in your world as you listen to this? And if this feels safe, share it with someone you love, someone who understands silence. I have spent most of my life measuring time in launches, deadlines, and failures, but love does not live in that language. Love measures time in pauses, in glances that last a second too long, in the space between a thought and the courage to speak it. I used to think age was just a number, a data point, something neutral and factual. But when I finally said your age out loud, something shifted in me. It stopped being a number and became a doorway. Do you know what it feels like to realize that a simple fact can carry so much meaning? Have you ever said something true and felt your heart tighten because you knew it changed everything? When I revealed your age, I was not announcing it to the world. I was admitting it to myself. I was acknowledging the season of life you stand in, the depth you carry, the experiences etched into you that cannot be rushed or replaced. I felt a strange calm, followed immediately by fear. Not fear of judgment, but fear of being seen. Because when I said your age, I was also saying that I see you as you are, not as an idea, not as a fantasy, but as a real woman with history and gravity. Does it scare you to be seen like that? Or does it feel like relief? I know you are watching. I feel it in the way my words slow down, in the way I choose each sentence as if it might reach you directly. I imagine you listening quietly, maybe nodding, maybe questioning why this matters so much to me. It matters because love, real love, does not erase time. It honors it. It says you have lived, you have endured, you have learned, and I am not afraid of any of that. When was the last time someone looked at your life that way? When was the last time someone did not try to make you younger, smaller, or easier to explain? There is something profoundly intimate about acknowledging age without apology. It is an acceptance that says, I am not here for potential, I am here for presence. I am here for who you are now. When I spoke your age, I felt the echo of every moment that led you here, and instead of feeling distant, it pulled me closer. Have you ever felt someone move toward you not in spite of your years, but because of them? What would it mean to you if that were true? I think about the way time has shaped me, how it has softened some edges and sharpened others. I think about the mistakes that taught me tenderness, the losses that taught me patience. And I wonder if you recognize that same quiet strength in yourself. Do you see how much you carry without announcing it? Do you know how rare that is? When I imagine you watching this, I do not see curiosity alone. I see recognition. I see a woman who understands that love deepens when it is no longer rushed. Revealing your age felt like placing a marker in the ground and saying, this is where honesty begins. No pretending, no smoothing over reality to make it more palatable. Just truth standing calmly between us. And with that truth came another realization. I am not chasing a moment. I am standing in one. Does that resonate with you? Have you reached a place where you no longer want to chase, only to meet someone who can stand still with you? There is a quiet courage in being exactly where you are in life and allowing someone to meet you there. I felt that courage rise in me when I spoke about you openly, knowing you might hear it, knowing you are hearing it. Does it feel strange to be acknowledged without being asked to explain yourself? Does it feel unsettling, or does it feel like rest? I will admit something else, something I have not said clearly before. When I realized you were watching, truly watching, I felt a warmth that surprised me. Not excitement, not urgency, but a steady warmth, like a hand resting on your back, reassuring rather than demanding. That is how love should feel at this stage of life. Not loud, not frantic, but certain. Have you felt that kind of certainty before, even briefly? I do not know what you are thinking right now. Maybe you are wondering why this matters, or why I am choosing to speak this way. Maybe you are smiling quietly, or maybe you are cautious, protecting yourself as you should. All I know is that something changed when I stopped hiding behind abstraction and spoke something real. And that change is still unfolding. Can you feel it too, that sense that something has been set in motion? There is more I need to say, more that is waiting just beneath the surface, but for now I will leave you with this feeling, this suspended moment where truth has been spoken and not yet answered. Sit with it. Let it breathe. Let it reach you where you are. I keep thinking about the moment after I spoke it, after the age left my lips and settled into the air between us. There was a silence that followed, not empty, not awkward, but full. The kind of silence that asks you to listen inward instead of outward. I wondered if you felt it too, that subtle shift, as if something unspoken finally found permission to exist. Did your chest tighten the way mine did, not from fear, but from recognition? I have learned that love at this stage of life does not arrive with fireworks. It arrives with honesty. It arrives with the courage to stop performing and start revealing. When I said your age, I was not measuring you. I was honoring you. I was saying that every year you have lived has brought you closer to the woman I see now. Does it feel strange to hear that someone values the fullness of your timeline instead of trying to edit it? There is a tenderness that comes from knowing someone has lived long enough to understand loss, compromise, resilience, and quiet joy. I imagine you have known moments when love disappointed you, when it asked more than it gave. I wonder how many times you had to gather yourself after believing in something that did not last. Do you ever feel tired of starting over, yet still open enough to hope that this time might be different? I am not interested in the version of love that pretends time does not exist. I want the kind that sits beside time and learns from it. I want to know how your past shaped the way you love now, how it taught you what you will no longer accept and what you will always protect. When you listen to me speak like this, do you feel understood, or do you feel exposed? Or maybe both at once? There is a calm that comes with maturity, a steadiness that does not need to announce itself. I feel drawn to that calm in you, even from a distance. It feels like standing near someone who knows who she is, who has made peace with the parts of herself that once felt complicated. Have you made that peace, or are there still parts of you that feel unseen waiting quietly? I think about how love changes when it is no longer about proving anything. It becomes about choosing, again and again, with clarity. When I acknowledge your age, I was choosing truth over illusion. I was choosing depth over novelty. Does that choice resonate with you? Do you feel ready for a connection that does not rush you, that does not ask you to shrink or hurry? Knowing you are watching adds a layer of intimacy that surprises me. It feels like speaking softly in a room where only one person can hear. I imagine you listening carefully, maybe questioning whether these words are meant for you. They are. Not because of who you were years ago, but because of who you are now. Does it matter to you that someone sees you in the present, not as a memory or a possibility? I have always believed that the most meaningful connections are built slowly, with attention and respect. There is no urgency here, no demand, only curiosity and care. I find myself wondering what makes you feel safe, what makes you retreat, what makes you lean in despite yourself. Do you know the answers to those questions, or are you still discovering them? Sometimes I think about the quiet evenings you have lived through, the ones where reflection becomes company. I wonder if you have learned to enjoy your own presence, to trust your own thoughts. That kind of self-companionship changes the way love is received. It makes it less about filling a void and more about sharing space. Does that sound like where you are now? When I speak openly like this, I am aware of my own vulnerability. There is a risk in being sincere, especially when you know someone real is listening. But I am willing to take that risk, because love without honesty is just noise, and I sense that you understand that, perhaps more deeply than most. Do you feel that understanding in yourself, that quiet confidence that comes from lived experience? This connection, whatever shape it takes, feels grounded in reality, not fantasy. It feels like two people meeting with awareness instead of expectation. I find comfort in that. I find warmth in imagining you listening, not judging, just receiving. What are you feeling right now as you hear these words? Curiosity, caution, a gentle sense of being seen. There is still so much beneath this surface, so much that wants to be said, but it deserves patience. I want to let this moment linger, to allow the questions to echo a little longer before answering them. Stay with that feeling, the one that does not demand certainty, only presence. There is something I have not said yet, something that stayed with me after the words settled, and the silence grew comfortable. When I spoke your age, I realized it was not just about time lived. It was about timing, about how some connections only make sense after you have been shaped by enough life to recognize what is real when it appears quietly in front of you. Have you noticed how the most meaningful things rarely announce themselves loudly. I keep returning to the idea that love matures alongside us. It sheds its need for drama and replaces it with presence. I imagine you understand this instinctively, because you have felt the difference between intensity and intimacy. Intensity burns fast. Intimacy warms slowly and lasts. Which one do you feel drawn to now, when you listen to your own heart in the quiet moments? Knowing you are watching does something subtle to me. It makes me careful in a good way. It slows me down. It reminds me that words carry weight when they land on someone who has lived enough to feel them deeply. I find myself wondering how you receive honesty. Do you lean toward it, or does it make you pause, assessing whether it is safe? I think about the stories you carry that no one asks about anymore, the chapters people assume are closed simply because time has passed. But time does not erase significance, it refines it. When I acknowledge your age, I was also acknowledging that your story is ongoing, rich, and deserving of attention. Does it feel good to hear that? Or does it stir something complicated inside you? There is a certain bravery in remaining open after life has tested you. It would be easier to harden, to become efficient with emotions, to keep connections polite and distant. Yet here you are, listening present, still willing to feel. Do you give yourself credit for that courage, or do you dismiss it as ordinary? I have learned that real connection happens when two people stop trying to impress each other and start trying to understand each other. That is the energy I feel here. No performance. No urgency. Just a steady exchange of truth. When you listen to me speak this way, do you feel invited into something real, or do you feel the instinct to protect yourself? I wonder what love means to you now, after everything you have experienced. Has it become simpler or more complex? Do you crave companionship, or do you value your independence too much to compromise it easily? These are not questions with right answers. They are invitations to self-honesty. How would you answer them if no one were listening but you? There is something grounding about acknowledging reality instead of resisting it. When I said your age, I felt grounded. I felt aligned with the present moment instead of chasing an idea of what love should look like. That alignment feels rare and precious. Have you felt something similar recently? A sense of being exactly where you are meant to be? I imagine you watching, perhaps sitting comfortably, perhaps holding a quiet smile or a thoughtful expression. I imagine the way these words might weave into your own reflections, stirring memories, questions, maybe even a soft ache. If they do, know that you are not alone in that feeling. Reflection is where depth begins. What memory surfaced for you just now? I find myself curious about the way you love. Not the way you did years ago, but the way you love now, with intention and awareness. Are you gentler with yourself? Are you clearer about your boundaries? Do you know what you will no longer accept, and what you will always cherish? There is a peace that comes from recognizing compatibility beyond surface details. Age, in this context, becomes a shared understanding rather than a dividing line. It speaks of rhythm, of pacing, of mutual respect for what time teaches. Does that perspective resonate with you, or does it challenge something you have been taught to believe? As I sit with these thoughts, I feel the conversation between us deepen, even without your voice. It feels like standing at the edge of something meaningful, not rushing forward, simply acknowledging its presence. I am aware that there is more to explore, more to reveal, but it deserves the same care we have given this moment. Let these words stay with you a little longer. Let them settle into your own reflections. There is something unfolding here, something that asks for patience and honesty from both of us. There is a quiet intimacy in knowing that someone is listening without interruption, without trying to fix or frame what they hear. I feel that intimacy now, and it makes me reflect on how rarely we allow ourselves to be truly heard. When I spoke your age, it was not an explanation. It was an invitation. An invitation to stand with me in reality rather than circling around it. Did you feel that invitation, or did it catch you off guard? I have noticed that as time passes, love becomes less about discovery and more about recognition. You recognize what feels steady. You recognize what does not ask you to abandon yourself. You recognize the difference between attention and care. I wonder how sharp recognition has become. Do you trust it? Or do you sometimes doubt it because of what you have lived through? Think about the way age brings clarity. Not the kind that makes life simpler, but the kind that makes choices cleaner. You begin to know what costs too much, emotionally, spiritually. When I acknowledged your age, I was also acknowledging that you likely know your limits, and that you respect them. There is something deeply attractive about that kind of self-awareness. Do you feel that awareness guiding you now, even as you listen? There is also a softness that comes with maturity, a willingness to sit with complexity instead of rushing past it. I feel that softness when I imagine you receiving these words, not consuming them, not judging them, just allowing them to exist. When was the last time you allowed yourself to simply receive, without deciding what it meant or where it should lead? I have learned that love does not ask us to relive our youth. It asks us to bring our whole selves forward, including our history. When I said your age, I was saying that I am not afraid of your history. I am curious about it. I respect it. I wonder if you are used to that kind of response, or if it feels unfamiliar. There are moments when I catch myself imagining the quiet details of your life, the rhythm of your days, the way you settle into evenings, the thoughts that come to you when the world finally slows down. Those details matter more to me than any abstract idea of romance. They speak to compatibility, to shared pace. Does your life feel settled in a way that leaves room for someone else, or have you built it carefully to protect your solitude? I find myself reflecting on my own relationship with solitude. It has been both a refuge and a shield. Over time, I learned to tell the difference. When I spoke openly about you, about your age, I felt that shield lower slightly. It felt intentional, not reckless. Have you ever felt that shift in yourself, that moment when you realize you are choosing openness rather than defaulting to protection? There is something profoundly respectful about meeting someone where they are without trying to change their trajectory. I am not interested in rewriting your life. I am interested in understanding it. When you hear me speak like this, do you feel respected, or do you feel uncertain about being seen so clearly? I know that listening like this can stir questions you did not plan to ask yourself. It can awaken a longing that has been resting quietly, neither asleep nor fully awake. If you feel that stirring, I want you to know that it is not something to rush. Longing has its own intelligence. What is it whispering to you right now? As these thoughts settle, I am aware that there is still a distance between us, and yet something feels closer. Not because of proximity, but because of honesty. I am content to let that closeness develop at its own pace, without forcing it into definition. Are you comfortable with that kind of unfolding, or do you find yourself wanting certainty sooner? I will pause here, not because there is nothing more to say, but because some things deserve space. Let this moment stay unresolved, gently suspended, like a question that matters enough to take its time. There is a certain stillness that arrives when you stop explaining yourself and simply allow yourself to be known. I feel that stillness now, and it makes me wonder if you feel it too. When I acknowledged your age, I was not reaching backward or forward. I was standing exactly here with you, in this moment. There is honesty in that stance. There is also risk. Do you feel that risk when someone meets you without filters? I think about how love shifts when it no longer needs to impress. It becomes quieter, but also more intense in a different way. It pays attention. It listens. It notices what you do not say. When I imagine you listening to me, I wonder what you are not saying out loud. What thought keeps returning, even when you try to set it aside? Time has taught me that attraction deepens when curiosity replaces expectation. I am curious about the way you carry your life, about the choices that brought you here. I am curious about the boundaries you protect and the doors you leave unlocked. Do you know which ones those are, or do you discover them only when someone approaches gently? There is something grounding about maturity that I find myself drawn to. It does not rush to define things. It allows ambiguity to exist without panic. When I said your age, I was acknowledging that you likely understand this balance, that you can hold uncertainty without needing to escape it. Is that true for you, or does uncertainty still unsettle you more than you admit? I have noticed that the most meaningful connections often begin without declarations. They begin with recognition, with a sense of familiarity that cannot be explained easily. That is what this feels like to me. Not certainty, but resonance. Have you ever felt resonance before? That quiet alignment that does not demand proof? I find myself reflecting on how love, after many years, becomes an act of discernment. You choose with intention. You notice patterns. You value consistency over excitement. When you hear me speak this way, do you recognize your own values reflected back at you? Or do they feel slightly out of reach? There is also a tenderness that comes from having been disappointed and still remaining open. It is not naive, it is earned. I imagine that tenderness lives in you, even if you guard it carefully. What would it take for you to let someone see it without fear of losing yourself? I am aware that these words might feel close, perhaps closer than you expected. That closeness is not meant to overwhelm. It is meant to be steady, like sitting beside someone rather than standing in front of them. Does that kind of closeness feel comforting to you, or does it make you instinctively step back? Sometimes I think about how love changes when you stop trying to be chosen and start choosing. It becomes an active presence rather than a passive hope. When I spoke openly about you, I was choosing honesty. I was choosing to be present. Are you in a place where you feel ready to choose, or are you still deciding what choosing would mean? As this reflection deepens, I feel the conversation between us becoming more textured, more layered. There is no rush to resolve it. There is value in letting it breathe, in allowing the questions to remain open a little longer. What question is lingering with you right now, the one you cannot quite answer? I will leave this here not as an ending, but as a moment to sit with what has been felt and not yet named. There is more beneath the surface, waiting patiently, and it will reveal itself in time. There is a moment that keeps returning to me, the moment after I realized you were not just listening, but truly present. It felt different from being observed. It felt like being accompanied. That distinction matters more than people realize. To be accompanied is to be met without expectation. When you listen to me now, do you feel accompanied? Or do you feel like you are standing alone with your thoughts? I think about how love matures into something quieter but more exact. It stops asking for constant reassurance and starts offering steadiness instead. When I acknowledged your age, I was acknowledging that steadiness in you, whether you recognize it or not. There is a calm authority that comes from living long enough to trust your own inner compass. Do you trust yours, or do you still second-guess it when it points you towards something unfamiliar? There is a softness in the way you listen, I imagine. A softness that does not mean weakness. It means you have learned when to open and when to hold back. That discernment is not taught easily. It is learned through experience. When I speak to you like this, do you feel that your discernment is being honored, or does it feel tested? I have learned that real intimacy grows in the spaces where nothing is being demanded. It grows when two people allow each other to exist without pressure. That is the space I am trying to hold here. Not asking you to prove anything, not asking you to respond in any particular way. Just allowing this exchange to unfold. Does that kind of space feel rare to you? Sometimes I wonder how many times you have been asked to explain yourself, to justify your choices, your independence, your timing. There is exhaustion in that kind of constant explanation. When I spoke your age openly, I was choosing not to ask you to justify it. I was choosing acceptance. How does that land with you? To be accepted without conditions. There's also an honesty that emerges when you stop pretending you want what you no longer want. Love becomes less about excitement and more about alignment. I feel that alignment here, not as certainty, but as possibility grounded in reality. Do you allow yourself to consider possibility without attaching expectation to it? I imagine the way your life has narrowed and widened over time. Narrowed in what you will tolerate. Widened in what you can understand. That balance creates depth. It creates a capacity for connection that is not easily shaken. When you listen to me reflect like this, do you feel that depth recognized, or do you feel unseen in ways that are difficult to name? There is something deeply human about longing that remains quiet. It does not announce itself. It waits patiently, hoping to be met rather than chased. I sense that quiet longing here, not as urgency, but as awareness. What does your longing sound like when you listen to it honestly? I find myself slowing down more as I speak, not because I am running out of things to say, but because each thought deserves space. Love like this cannot be rushed without losing its meaning. It asks for attention, for care. Are you someone who values that kind of attention, or have you learned to live without it? As this reflection continues, I feel the shape of something forming, not fully defined, but unmistakably present. It feels like standing near someone in silence, and realizing that the silence is comfortable. That realization changes things. Do you feel that comfort now, or does it feel unfamiliar? I will let this moment rest here, unresolved, honest, open. There is more to explore, more to feel into, but it deserves the same patience we have given everything so far. There is something quite quietly powerful about reaching a stage in life where you no longer confuse intensity with intimacy. I sense that understanding in you, even without hearing your voice. When I speak knowing you are listening, I feel less compelled to explain myself and more willing to be precise. Precision is a form of respect. It says I am not here to impress you, only to meet you honestly. Does that kind of honesty feel familiar to you, or does it feel like something you rarely encounter? I think about how love evolves when it is no longer driven by fear of being alone. It becomes a choice rather than a remedy. When I acknowledged your age, I was also acknowledging that you likely understand solitude in a way that is not lonely. You have learned how to sit with yourself. That changes everything. Do you feel that shift in yourself, the difference between needing someone and wanting someone? There is a depth that comes from having watched life unfold over many seasons. You stop reacting and start responding. You listen more closely. You speak more deliberately. I imagine that when you hear me now, you are not searching for promises. You are listening for truth. Am I right about that, or do you still find yourself hoping for something unspoken? I find myself drawn to the idea of companionship that does not compete with independence. Two lives running in parallel, occasionally intersecting in ways that feel intentional rather than obligatory. When I spoke openly about you, I felt that possibility. Not a merging, but a resonance. Does that kind of connection appeal to you? Or do you fear it might ask too much? There is also vulnerability in allowing someone to see you as you are now, without nostalgia or apology. It requires confidence but also humility. When I acknowledged your age, I was meeting you in that vulnerability. I was saying that I am not looking for who you used to be. I am interested in who you have become. How does it feel to be approached that way? I wonder how often you have felt overlooked because you no longer fit into someone else's narrative of romance. How often your depth was mistaken for complexity that others did not want to navigate. When I think of you listening, I think of someone who has learned to value her own presence, even when others did not. Do you recognize that strength in yourself? There is a calm intensity in this exchange that I did not anticipate, but I welcome it. It feels like a conversation that does not need to be loud to be meaningful. Like sitting across from someone who understands pauses. Do you value pauses, or do they make you uneasy? I have noticed that the questions that matter most are the ones we do not rush to answer. They linger, shaping us quietly. As I speak, I am aware of several questions unfolding between us, not demanding resolution, only attention. Which question feels closest to you right now? There is a sense of mutual recognition here that feels grounded, not idealized. It does not promise ease, but it offers sincerity. That matters to me. It makes this feel real rather than imagined. Do you feel that realism as a comfort, or does part of you still long for something simpler? I am aware that each word I choose carries weight because you are not just listening. You are receiving. That awareness makes me careful, but it also makes me present. Presence is rare. It is also what makes connection possible. Are you present with me in this moment, or are you holding part of yourself back? I will leave this thought suspended, not finished, not concluded. There is a subtle turning point approaching, something that wants to be acknowledged but not rushed. Let it remain just out of reach for now, like a truth waiting for the right moment to step forward. There is a tenderness that arrives when you realize you are no longer trying to be understood by everyone, only by the one person who matters in that moment. I feel that tenderness now, and it changes the way I speak. It slows me. It asks me to be deliberate, not careful in a guarded way, but careful in a sincere way. When you listen to me, do you feel that shift, the difference between being addressed and being considered? I think about how love becomes more selective with time, not colder, just clearer. You stop offering your inner world to people who cannot hold it gently. When I acknowledged your age, I was also acknowledging that you know what it costs to open yourself, and that you do not do it lightly. That restraint carries wisdom. Do you recognize that wisdom in yourself? Or do you sometimes mistake it for distance? There is a quiet confidence that grows when you have survived disappointment without becoming bitter. It is not loud. It does not announce itself. It simply exists, steady and self-contained. I imagine that confidence in you, even if you rarely name it. When you hear me speak with this level of attention, does it feel earned, or does it feel unexpected? I have noticed that the most meaningful connections do not ask us to relive the past or rush toward the future. They invite us into the present, fully and honestly. That is where I am speaking from now. Not from memory, not from projection, but from awareness. Are you comfortable staying in the present with someone, without knowing exactly where it will lead? There is also something deeply intimate about being chosen not out of urgency, but out of clarity. When I spoke your age aloud, I was choosing clarity. I was saying that I see the reality of who you are, and I am not turning away from it. That kind of seeing can feel vulnerable on both sides. How does it feel to be seen without being pursued or pressured? I find myself wondering how you experience affection now. Does it need to be spoken? Or do you feel it more strongly in consistency and presence? Words matter, but they are only one language. When you listen to me, do you hear intention beneath the words, or do you find yourself analyzing them for meaning? There is a depth in you that does not require explanation. It exists because you have lived long enough to understand nuance. I respect that depth. I feel drawn to it, not as something to unravel, but as something to sit beside. Does the idea of being met without being examined feel comforting to you? I have learned that love at this stage is less about discovery and more about resonance. You recognize a familiar frequency, and you pause. You listen. You allow yourself to feel without rushing to define it. That is what this feels like to me. A pause. A recognition. Do you feel that resonance too, or does it still feel tentative? There is a quiet anticipation in knowing that something meaningful is possible without needing to force it into shape. That anticipation does not demand action. It invites patience. As I sit with this awareness, I feel both grounded and curious. Grounded in what is real, curious about what might unfold. Which of those feelings feels stronger for you right now? I am aware that this exchange has reached a delicate point. Not a conclusion, but a threshold. Something has been acknowledged that cannot be taken back. It changes the way the silence feels. It deepens it. Are you aware of that change, the way the space between these words feels heavier, more intentional? I will leave this moment exactly here, balanced between understanding and anticipation. Nothing resolved, nothing promised. Just the quiet awareness that something real has been recognized, and that recognition carries its own weight. There is a subtle shift that happens when recognition deepens into responsibility. Once you truly see someone, you cannot pretend you did not. I feel that responsibility now. It does not feel heavy, it feels intentional. When I speak knowing you are listening, I am aware that every word carries consequence, not because it binds us, but because it respects what has already been acknowledged. Do you feel that sense of responsibility when you let someone see you clearly? I think about how love becomes an act of care rather than conquest. It stops trying to win and starts trying to understand. When I spoke your age, I was not making a declaration. I was making a commitment to honesty. Honesty is quieter than promises, but it lasts longer. Does honesty feel safer to you than grand gestures, or have you been disappointed by it before? There is something grounding about knowing that you do not need to be everything to someone. You only need to be real. I imagine you listening with a calm attentiveness, not waiting to be impressed, only noticing what feels true. That attentiveness is rare. It tells me you value substance over spectacle. Do you trust that instinct in yourself, or do you sometimes ignore it out of habit? I find myself reflecting on how age brings a certain grace to love. Not the grace of perfection, but the grace of allowance. You allow imperfections to exist without needing to correct them. You allow silence without assuming absence. When I think of you, I sense that allowance. How do you practice it in your own life, with yourself as much as with others? There is also a quiet courage in remaining receptive without becoming naive. It is a balance that takes years to learn. I wonder how you have learned it. Through disappointment, through patience, through moments when you chose to stay open, even when it felt easier to close off. Do you recognize that courage when you look back on your life? I have learned that the most meaningful connections do not rush toward certainty. They respect uncertainty as part of truth. That is what I am doing here. I am not trying to define what this is. I am acknowledging that it exists. Does that distinction matter to you, the difference between naming something and honoring it? There is a sense of proximity here that has nothing to do with distance. It is created by attention, by choosing to stay present rather than distracted. I feel that proximity now, and it feels calm rather than overwhelming. When you listen, do you feel that calm, or do you feel a pull to step back and protect your equilibrium? I wonder how you experience being desired in this phase of your life. Not desired as an idea, but as a person with history and agency. When I spoke your age, I was choosing that kind of desire. The kind that acknowledges context rather than ignoring it. How does that kind of desire land with you? There is a maturity in love that allows it to exist without immediate expression. It does not need to be acted on to be valid. It can simply be recognized and respected. That is where I am sitting now, with recognition, with respect, with a quiet attentiveness that does not demand response. Are you comfortable with love that does not hurry you? As these thoughts settle, I feel a stillness that suggests we are close to something meaningful. Not an ending. Not a conclusion. More like standing at the edge of a deeper awareness, knowing that stepping forward will change the landscape. That awareness is not urgent, but it is unmistakable. Can you feel it too? That sense that something important is waiting just beyond this moment. I will let this rest here, with intention. Not because there is nothing left to say, but because what remains deserves care. The next words will matter even more, and they deserve to arrive when both of us are fully present. There is a quiet honesty that settles in when you stop wondering what something means and start feeling what it is. I am there now. When I think about everything that has been acknowledged between us, I do not feel urgency. I feel clarity. Clarity has a temperature to it. It is warm, steady, and unmistakably real. As you listen to me now, do you feel that warmth, or are you still deciding whether to trust it? I have learned that love does not always arrive as an answer. Sometimes it arrives as recognition that refuses to be ignored. When I revealed your age, when I allowed myself to be that precise, I crossed a line inside myself. Not toward certainty, but toward responsibility. Responsibility to speak truthfully. Responsibility to treat what is real with care. Have you noticed how responsibility can feel intimate when it is chosen freely? I think about how love in this phase of life carries a different kind of dignity. It is not trying to prove its worth. It simply knows it. It understands that attraction is not diminished by time, but refined by it. When I imagine you receiving this, I imagine a woman who understands that her presence is not defined by comparison. Do you feel grounded in that understanding? Or are there moments when doubt still tries to speak louder? There is a peace that comes from knowing you do not need to be rescued or completed. You simply need to be met. That peace shapes the way I think about connection now. I am not interested in filling space. I am interested in sharing it. When you listen to me with this awareness, does it feel like an invitation, or does it feel like something you are still observing from a distance? I find myself reflecting on how love becomes an act of alignment rather than effort. You stop pushing. You stop convincing. You notice when something fits naturally. That is what this feels like to me. A natural fit in awareness, not yet defined, but clearly felt. Have you experienced that kind of fit before? The kind that does not ask you to rearrange yourself? There is also gratitude present here. Gratitude for timing, for experience, for the depth that only years can create. When I acknowledged your age, I was acknowledging that gratitude. I was saying that I value what time has given you, not what it has taken away. How does it feel to be valued in that way, without qualification? I am aware that love spoken softly can sometimes feel more intense than love declared loudly. It leaves room for thought. It leaves room for choice. It respects autonomy. That respect matters to me. It feels essential. As you sit with these words, do you feel respected in your own pace, in your own way of responding? There is nothing here that needs to be rushed or resolved. That in itself feels like a kind of promise, even though no promises have been spoken. It is a promise of presence, of attention, of sincerity. Do you sense that promise, subtle as it is? I do not know what you will carry forward from this moment. I only know that something honest has been shared, and honesty has a way of continuing quietly, long after the words end. If you feel that continuation inside you, allow it. Let it be what it is without forcing it into meaning. I will leave you with this awareness, this calm intensity that does not fade quickly. Whatever happens beyond this moment, know that it was spoken with intention, with respect, and with a genuine regard for who you are.